scroll up and see what we got. There he is.
Hey, you scrolled me up. How's it going, everybody?
Very good, very good.
Wow, the effects here are just like top notch. This is like Hollywood style effects for the scrolling.
Yep, you would have thought that we went down after we were in San Francisco and went through Hollywood.
It doesn't get any higher than that. But at least people might have a hint of what today's topic is about. What do you think it's about?
It's all about encouraging the scroll.
Yeah, I mean, so scrolling on a website. One of our goals to drive conversion is we want people to dig deeper, to get further in the site. If they get there, today's tendency is to have longer scrolling pages because we're used to social media where I watch my wife flick through Facebook a ton all day, and so she's going to love that comment. But, we're just used to just kind of scrolling through, and so that's where websites have gone. But there are cases with business websites where people don't scroll down, and that is horrible for time on site, further exploration, and conversion at the end of the day.
Absolutely. So as part of the kind of that visitor's journey, you want to get them to where you want them to land, right? So if we're going to give them those different opportunities for different types of conversions, in the past episodes you talked about soft conversions, depending on where you're at in your research or you're ready to make a decision, you're probably looking for different things.
Yeah.
So how do you encourage the scroll? How do you get people to that place?
So this is where that whole UI, UX experience comes in, where it's really a mixture of design and messaging to just try and drive people into that scroll. And so, I'll pop up, two side-by-sides that we have. And this is actually interesting because it's our site.
Yeah.
And it's two different versions that we have, two different pages. And so we did some heat map testing on this. And that's the best place to start for people is if you've got a site, use something like Hotjar, put that on there because it can show you heat mapping of how far people scroll on a page, where their mouse moves. So even simple things like are they putting their mouse over a certain area and even clicking on it, but it's something that they can't click on. But the scrolling piece is really beneficial. The interesting thing that if you take a look at this side by side, and this is in our download that people can get, but something as subtle as, just look here, the page kind of has this border, and there is actually content down below here that looks similar to this. I have to explain that. And on this side, all we have is the blue extends down here, and then we have an image that's cut in half.
Yeah.
Look at the huge difference. And this is just a visual indication. And there's a lot of different ways that you can visually indicate. There's, the little icons that people put. It's half an image. It's text coming up. But what they do say is that if people see like an N, they assume that the page doesn't go any further. And so they might not scroll. So this is really a lot about that just user interface design, understanding how people think in best practices, and then leveraging some of those tools like scroll mapping to just see what works. We actually changed our homepage. We designed this and we took a look at how some of these things worked, and we made some adjustments to, make people do exactly what they want, what we want them to do.
Now, it's super interesting seeing the two. Is there ever a case where you actually want people to spend their time interacting with the top of the page there?
Yeah, that's a great point. And so, this is the next is where you think about the journey. And I call this focus path design. And if you notice on this side, it doesn't look like there's a scroll area. There's really only two actions that a person can take hitting here. One, it's a primary, like that is the one thing I really want them to do. And then even the fact that we've hidden our navigation and put it in this, hamburger mega menu is kind of driving the fact that, we're not giving a lot of options. It's like this or this, and it opens up and allows people to browse.
Yeah.
But that's versus, you look on this side, the typical navigation. They've got multiple there. Then they've got even more navigation. They've got two actions here. This contact link here, these other actions. In this scenario, that's kind of that open browsing design where someone can really they've got a lot of options. They've got to decide where to go.
Yeah.
And I think there's that choice is, do you want to try and force people down a path and you're almost making the decisions for them about how they're learning and reading about your organization, or do you want to give them the ability to just kind of find whatever they want? And they're different strategies, and it depends on what your approach is and maybe how knowledgeable your visitors tend to be. Are you in an industry that most people know? Are you talking to existing customers? In some cases, you really want to force them down a story so you can kind of give them different pieces at a time. And you may not even have any actions. You want someone just to scroll so that you can present some content and then give them an action at the end. So there's a lot of unique strategies that you can take to go about that. And I don't think most people think through that stuff.
Yeah, I agree. That's a good point. Can we go back to the last one real quick? The last slide. So I found this one really interesting when you showed me this information when you were first looking at it. And this one, what did you say? How far did you get people to scroll down on this example here?
Yeah, actually, so the bottom of the page, even the very last footer of this, and it's a very long page, was getting, I think, like 70% of people to the bottom.
Wow.
But if you look at something like this, we were only getting about like 50% of people to the next section.
Yeah.
And so it was significant. And again, it doesn't mean that either one's wrong. In this scenario, there's a time to say we want the majority of our visitors to really hit that action. If they do scroll, if they're part of that 50% that makes it to the next level, that's fine, and we can provide more information, but we were trying to force that. Versus this one where we don't even have an action up here.
Yep.
The whole purpose is the scroll. So part of the reason that this is happening is, one, they don't even have an alternative, but two, we're really hinting at them to move down.
Yeah, one of the reasons this stuck out to me is because kind of like the older mindset, right? We used to always be about being above the fold, right? You wanted everything above the fold. And I think a lot of people still, because that was for so many years, right? It's fairly recent. And again, it was really driven by social media, people expecting there to be more and more. Something that stood out to me is I think a lot of people, if they saw this, they would say, no, let's opt for something like this because that looks unfinished.
Yeah.
But have you ever heard of the Zeigarnik effect?
No.
It's something really cool, something worth Googling. It's the idea that people have such a hard time with unfinished thoughts, right? It's like how the news,
and they want to finish
when they tell you what they're going to share in the next segment, that's how they get you to come back. Or the end of your favorite Netflix series, the reason they get you to tune back in is that cliffhanger, right?
That's pretty cool.
When I saw that, that's what I thought of. I thought, even though if you were looking at that and someone, a marketer comes to you and your designer and says, it's one of these options, if the goal is to get them to scroll, sometimes giving someone just a piece, even with like a headline, sometimes it's just grabbing enough attention to get them to want to know more. And I think that's what's happening there. It's like, what else is on there?
Yeah.
What is that?
You want to learn.
It's the tip of the iceberg. So
no, I think that's an awesome insight. And, it's interesting because I think, the patterns show that most people don't visit a lot of pages. They're visiting 3, 4, 5 pages, but people are scrolling more because they are used to the social media. So sites have changed where you had mentioned everybody tried to keep things above the fold, but then you had a ton of pages. Yeah. Now, especially when you look at software companies, it's like features, pricing, about, and you're done at the end of the day.
A lot of those single page websites.
Exactly.
And then just scrolling through more content.
And so we really have to make sure that, especially if we're going to create those longer pages, and for SaaS particularly, if you're creating like a features page where you want someone to learn all the features and go through kind of a product tour of your offering, you really want to encourage scrolling. And that doesn't mean just scrolling at the top, but once they get to the next section, we still need to encourage them to scroll to the next level.
Yeah.
And so it really is a science of how you design. And this is just one simple trick. There's lots of different, design styles and approaches that you can use to, like you said, I love that, like hinting that we want to learn what's beyond because we're hinting, versus this that we know it ends, so we're going to stop our thinking and make a move.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, so scrolling, and again, this all comes back to the fact that what we're trying to do is increase conversion. And the last thing that we want is a bounce rate effect, is where people are coming and just leaving the site, or if we've got, calls to action for those soft conversions or the medium commitment conversions, is that we really want to make sure that people are getting to that information so they can take that action.
Yeah. So would you have one simple way to look at a website? Let's say if you're looking at a heat map and say this one should be more focused as opposed to this one more, I forgot what you called them. You had the more focused.
Yeah, the focused design versus open.
Yeah. Are there any little indicators that someone can
of which one it should be?
Which one might, like, where is my site trending towards based on behavior? Should I keep them on a focus path, or should I allow them to explore?
I think that goes back to what I kind of hinted at a little bit, is thinking about the target audience, thinking about your offering, and what the best way to go through something is. If I'm Slack and I'm a messaging app, that's a very familiar market. People can understand it. I can get a chance to move around. But if I'm in something very new and I kind of have to explain the concept, the last thing I want somebody to do is jump ahead and find out other information when I really need to get something across to help them even understand the concept.
Gotcha. So it's so level of market sophistication, like what they understand, you want to allow them to look around a little bit more.
Yeah.
And then a more guided path for people that most of your visitors don't really.
And that's thinking about your persona and where you are in the buying cycle, knowledge of your audience, and then it even fits in the campaign. You have a completely different approach on your homepage than you do on a features page that you might have on a landing page that comes from an ad.
Yeah.
And so all of those are different. Home pages, you could have a little bit more of an open design. A features page, you definitely want to drive that scrolling.
Yeah.
A landing page, that's kind of a mixture of the two, where you want to drive scrolling, but you want to reduce the amount of open browsing that people can do outside the page. That's why we call them squeeze pages.
Yeah.
So I think, it does come back to that whole strategy piece of web, which I think is so important, is who's the target audience? What are your goals? How are you going to get people to convert? For each of the pages, what's the goal of that page? What's the journey people need to go through? There's so many different factors.
For sure.
And it sounds confusing, but at the end of the day, it's just judging, having an intention for everything you do. If you have a page, what's the intention that you want? And then designing for that intention, versus I think a lot of people go to a page and just think, what do I want to present? And, what do I think looks good? Yeah. Instead of, again, just to repeat, find the intention of the page and then design towards the intention. Yeah. That's not what most people do.
Great way to start is by looking at the guidebook that we have, the Killer SaaS Websites Guidebook. If you go to SaaS.coach, you can download it right there. You can check out our past episodes as well.
Yeah, we've got tons of stuff, and all this stuff is building up. I think, we've said it before, but if you follow a number of these tips, it's really going to significantly change and increase the conversion on a website. So
definitely.
Following a couple of these is just a huge boost to end results.
I think it could be challenging to say, hey, you need to look at this, kind of think about it strategically and put all these different pieces together. So what we have, the principles, allows you to do that in a pretty,
bite-size.
You work at them one at a time, they all work together, very powerful.
Yeah,
so
I totally agree.
Download it, SaaS.coach, and be sure to like our page, follow us on YouTube, wherever you're tuning in.
Yeah.
And we will see you next week.
Yeah, we're going to have another episode, and it'll be fun. We're just trying to figure out how to make websites for SaaS companies work better. Absolutely. All right, well, I'm scrolling out.
All
see
right.
you, dude.
We'll see you next time.
I don't think that worked. Is this the blooper part of it at the end?
This is it. This
is
the part.
Because there was my head there. That's pretty much not how it works.